Good evening and welcome to the fall live from the New York Public Library season. I'm thrilled and tickled to welcome to our opening night Margaret Atwood and Carl Hiaasen. Tonight, two formidable writers, formidable in both the French and English sense of the word, talk to each other about their work, both recent, as in Carl Hiaasen's novel Bad Monkey and Margaret Atwood's final entry in her Mad Adam trilogy. They will also discuss together their work and worlds as a whole. Let's see what they say to each other. I do not quite know, and I, like you, relish the mystery. And I also would like to say quickly that Carl Hiaasen and Margaret Atwood are meeting tonight for the first time. Please warmly welcome to the Live from the New York Public Library stage, Carl Hiaasen and Margaret Atwood.
Well, I want to talk about the snake handling.
Oh, I was afraid of that. I used to breed snakes.
What kind of snakes?
Rat snakes.
Okay, so these were not venomous.
They were not venomous
No.
snakes, no, and it explains a lot about my writing. I always preferred snakes as pets because they provided unconditional indifference. But that was true. I didn't make that up.
My brother was somewhat like you. He was an older brother, and he too was very fond of snakes, and indeed he used to bring them into the house as a small boy, and he used to take them to bed with him. And we were living in the woods at that point. We had no furnace or anything like that. And the snakes would get out in the middle of the night, and they would crawl into the warm ashes of the wood stove. After this had happened several times, my mother explained to him that snakes were happier outside. Did your mother explain that to you as well? Or were you too old by then?
No, they get away. Snakes escape a lot, and my mother would find them in various places in the house, and then she would send my father to explain to me in very curt language that the snakes belonged outside. But my mother was, and is to this day, indulgent about my weird habits. Nature, I think, when I grew up, on the edge of the Everglades in South Florida, and you've obviously, nature's a huge part of your books. I mean, it shapes a lot of our stories and a lot of our, whenever I need revenge on something in a book or somebody in a book, I always try to think of a natural way to disable or disfigure them, or to some force of nature.
Well, be blunt, kill them.
Kill them? Well, sometimes killing is too good, but I just think, but I mean, I tell people, I read these stories, Fluffy, somebody's walking the dog gets eaten by an alligator, and I always find myself rooting for the alligator. But talk about how, I mean, even in Mad Adam, there is, I hate hearing the word environmental theme, but there are certainly forces of nature that guide these characters and have guided them throughout the trilogy, but nature rising up. And my favorite and the pagoons and these great morphed animals that you've created, I love that stuff.
Oh, human beings are working on those even as we speak.
It's
scary. It's not that I created them, they are being created already. But yes, nature, people talk about nature as if, we're over here and nature's over there, but in fact, what we're talking about is everything that surrounds us, every component of our bodily forms, everything we eat, breathe, and drink. So there isn't a kind of barrier between us in here and nature out there. Like it or not, it's part of us. And like it even less, we're part of it. So we're stuck with each other, we and nature, and we should probably come to an accommodation fairly soon, because should we kill the ocean, we will cease to breathe. it being the place where the marine algae create the oxygen, which they did 1.9 billion years ago, before which there wasn't any oxygen in the atmosphere and iron didn't rust. So it came from plants. Our ability to be on the planet at all came from plants. And should we kill them, that's it for us.
But do you think that in much fiction, and I don't read as much as I should, that there is, I get a sense more and more that an absence of the sort of marveling at nature that I had in my childhood, and you obviously did in yours, whether you're walking in the woods or whether you're traipsing through a swamp or whatever it is, you would stop and see something, and it would be so extraordinary. And yet a lot of, at least my stories, are fueled, as the journalism is, by an anger about what's happening and sort of the paving and subdividing of all my childhood places, this complete disrespect, or I would say lack of the people don't seem to find anything magical about it. When I was a kid, that was the only thing I found magical.
Well, the reason they don't is that their parents are too afraid to let them outside the house. And yet, that in fact is true. So that the kind of thing that kids used to do, I mean, we were told, come home when it's dark. You know?
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Where if you've been, none of that, just come home when it's dark. Don't go down to the ravine. Because there are bad men down there. But of course, we immediately did that. See if we could find any. Do not go through the storm sewer. Through it we went in a shot, of course. So yes, we did all of those things. We were really quite badly unsupervised. I suppose you were too.
Yeah, there was no supervision because I came from a kind of a large family, and my mother was happy to see me out the door. And it was the same thing. It was just be home at dark, or be home, don't let your father see you come in after dark, sort of thing. And they would come in, and I would come in with snakes, or we'd catch, you know, I remember bringing home, and I wouldn't recommend this, a raccoon, like a full-grown wild raccoon. And a possum one time, and you know, it was just.
Were these animals dead?
No.
Were they rabid?
They were not rabid.
Why did they let you pick them up?
Well, they weren't.
You had a box.
Yes.
You had a box. Okay.
They were in a box.
And some sticks, right?
Yeah, and when you opened the box, they would
come out.
They were pissed. They were,
right.
Yeah. They would really come out pissed off. But, you know, my mother at this point, she's got kids running around, she just throws up her hands, but it was a great childhood for me. That really doesn't exist anymore, at least in South Florida. I'm sure it does somewhere, but not where I am.
It does exist, just not where you are at the moment. But it exists much less than it did, because people think there are all these, in fact, so different were the times that when I saw the word child molester written down, I had actually never heard it pronounced. And I thought it was child molester. And that this was a job I could get as a child, because that was like those people who go around collecting worms. I thought you could go around collecting moles as a child. You think I'm making this up?
No,
I'm making it up.
I actually.
Yes, I mean, they used to write things like that in newspapers, and you would be told to ask about it later when you were older, but they would also write things like, she was dead but had not been interfered with. And that also made you think very hard. What are they talking about? So this is one of the things about reading. It was full in those days of mysteries. Things you just couldn't figure out. And so were the advertisements, because you were not allowed to be explicit about quite a few things. So it was really quite mysterious. It was very surreal, that whole world of print and magazines.
I was when I was reading Matt Adam, I was thinking of, I mean, obviously, and I don't mean to be redundant, but I'm sure others have pointed out. I mean, I see Orwell, I see Kurt Vonnegut, and some of the great names that you have in there. There's almost an influence of Dr. Seuss. I mean, I mean that's a compliment. I mean, it's just you just have these extraordinarily colorful names, and I work in my own books on very, very, very hard on the names because I want them to stick. And I'm wondering if you do the same thing. I mean, I will go through a whole series of names, but with a character before I'm happy with it because I don't want someone on page 300 thumbing back.
To be confused about who they are. Yeah, okay. So name your baby, a great help. And also Lives of the Saints.
Lives of the Saints.
Yeah. The telephone book.
Yeah, I do use that.
Back when there were some. Well, what you don't want is to find that you have made up the name of somebody and that person exists in your hometown.
No.
And they're not thrilled with being a serial killer.
No, you have to be careful with that. But I do use the phone books, and I try to, and usually if I'm in a rural town or a town that is special in some way, in sort of the deliverance sense of special. Where I just need that certain kind of mutant, and there you go. But I also want it to resonate in some way with the qualities of the character, because I don't want people to get confused, because it used to tick me off reading a book, and I'd have to go back. Some of the Russian novelists, God bless them, I felt like hanging myself. I couldn't keep track of it. You almost have to have.
Because they're all called Nikolai.
Yeah. I mean, So I just thought, for the simple tastes of my readers, I would want something that stuck, and that also it helped me along with the plot. If I had that name to go with that character, in a weird way, do you experience that? I mean,
I experience every single bit of that. Including graveyards. Tombstones.
Tombstones.
There's some very interesting names on tombstones. There is a hazard, which is that person may have had a descendant named after him or her. So you have to make sure that is not true in that location.
I'm Norwegian. We don't do graveyards.
You don't do them?
No, we have already the gloomiest view possible of where we're going. It's just a reminder to us. But I was with a friend one time when I was at school at the University of Florida, outside in a place called Cedar Key, Florida. They have a graveyard, and he thought it would be fun. Let's go look at and he was with his significant other, and we're sort of traipsing through the stones, and he stops, stone cold, and there is a tombstone with his name on it. Yeah, that cured him. That cured him.
I thought you were going to say, and then up through the soil came a hand. No?
Would have been a better story. No, this is there were no mushrooms involved in that adventure. We were just. We were stone sober, and there it was, and it spooked him.
Now that we're on the subject of dead people, what I've always wanted to ask you is this, because you have such novel ways of disposing of people. I think my favorite is probably Velcro Face.
Chemo.
Who was put into wasn't he the one that was put into the thing you grind up trees in?
Oh, the wood chipper. No, he wasn't the one that went into the wood chipper, but he was involved in that story. You know where the wood chipper story came from?
Somebody really got put into a wood.
Yeah, and an Eastern Airlines pilot. Some of you are old enough to remember Eastern Airlines. He had become disenchanted with his marriage, and he put his wife through a wood chipper. You saw Fargo. I wrote this scene before Fargo, and he put her in there. And the way that they caught him was she'd had some excellent dental work, and there was one tooth that had a particular gold onlay on it, and the forensic people found it, and he's in jail. So I stole it. I steal everything. This is coming from the background of journalism. When you start writing novels, you just steal from the headline.
Okay, all right. So Velcro Face has one arm.
He has a weed
And
whacker
on
attached to his arm.
Yeah, yes, no, did you make that up?
I did. The
Okay,
weed
so-
whacker I did make up. Here was the problem: is his job in that particular novel, Skin Tight, he was a bouncer at a punk club on South Beach, and I had been in this punk club or one similar to it, and it was the only time in my life I'd ever felt sorry for the bouncers. It was such a bad scene in the mosh pit, and I thought. And I was standing there with the mayor of Miami Beach, who I didn't expect to see there. He went to jail later too.
What is a mosh pit?
Well, I should know what a mosh pit is. A mosh pit is when there's a concert and a loud concert. There's an area in the front of the stage where the kids will get together and they'll sort of crash into each other and they'll pass each other over their heads and they'll go diving into it. Some of the performers will dive into it, and it's all sweaty, and nowadays they're all on ecstasy and Molly, but in those days they were just drunk. And it's it's a very violent sort of scene, and it was a punk scene, so there were skinheads, and there were that whole nonsense. And I saw these poor bouncers trying, and I'd said to myself at the time, I said, but you know what would clean up this scene is a really big industrial weed whacker. If you walked into the mosh pit with a weed whacker, you would get everybody's attention. And so in the scene where Chemo loses his arm, loses his arm to a barracuda, which was also based on a real story, I didn't want a regular prosthesis. He was too special for a regular prosthesis. So I thought, what if a weed whacker? And I went to a plastic surgeon I knew, and I said, Jerry, I have an idea. And I told him the idea. He was horrified, and I said, I don't care if it's plausible or not. Is it possible to do that? Could I get one if I needed one? And he sat down and he sketched out for me how he would attach, where the battery pack would go, and everything. It was so I said, that's literature. I'm off. Boom.
Yeah, so now we're on the subject of research. And I have actually seen, and it's in a library here in the United States, I have seen the notes that Bram Stoker made for Dracula.
Wow.
Let's see, I got respect.
What kind?
But amongst those notes are the train tables for the Eastern European trains that he was going to put his characters on, because he wanted them to be on real trains. He obviously didn't want to get those kinds of fan letters that you can't sometimes get, which is, there is no 952 to Transylvania, you idiot.
This was even before Twitter and Facebook, and he's still getting
those
harassed.
Things used to be letters, all in capital letters with different colors of pencils. You know what I mean? Underlinings,
crayons in my
crayons,
case.
Yes. So you do the research.
Well, I did. Some, but again,
you check your facts.
Yes.
Yes.
And now with Google and with all the resources of the internet, there's really no excuse to. I made the mistake one time of having a gun fire in a certain way that this particular gun couldn't fire, or it was the wrong caliber. It was something.
How much hate mail did you get?
Oh, I got scolded, and I got some nasty mail from some really hardcore NRA types, and I thought I'm never going to make a mistake. So now I research every. You
should have written back to them and said, from now on, I'm not putting any guns in my books at all. It's just going to be nice.
Yeah, that's right.
It's going to be knives, explosives, and strangling, and dolphins, and
That dolphin. Yeah, the dolphin sex thing was real too. But
I honestly did not think you would have made that up.
Oh, I know. I didn't make that up. No, that was real. But the guy, yes. We had some episodes in Florida where if you went to certain tourist attractions, you get to swim with the dolphins, jump in the lagoon with the dolphins. Really the highlight of every dolphin's day. So some of them had started taking an amorous interest in the female tourists. And so I just used that to facilitate the demise of a certain character. And people, of course, said, "You're a sick bastard. How could you make that up?" But let's talk about research, because with Matt Adam, I know a little about the internet, but I don't nearly know, obviously, what you know. The stuff on hacking, there's a character in this book, Zeb, who does some amazing things online. His father is one of these, what would be now a TV preacher, but sort of a worldwide global fraud preacher, you know. And Zeb gets into his secret bank accounts. He dusts the trail behind him. He gets in all the coding, you seem to know a suspicious amount about hacking. I read this and I was just using the magic marker because I thought, my God, I'm learning all kinds of stuff. I'm changing my passwords on all my accounts immediately. How much research did you do?
Well, it's not too hard. Actually, there are conventions of hackers. There's white hat, black hat conventions, but there's also a thing in Toronto called the Citizen Lab. And the Citizen Lab is dedicated to tracing surveillance programs and also spying and hacking globally. So it was they who found out, for instance, that somebody in China was looking at people through the camera thing on their computer. Remember that?
Yes.
And they were also the people who discovered that somebody had hacked the Indian military, thus hacking everybody who was doing business with the Indian military. And right now there's quite a lot in the news media about the fact that certain governments have prevailed upon certain website providers to provide back doors into accounts so that governments can access that kind of information. But if you have a back door, it also allows other people in there too.
Right.
And as it was explained to me by one of the people that I talked to, there's this many people trying to keep people out of classified information, but there are this many people trying to get in. Do the math like that. So yes, you can have a lot of encryption, and you can even have pretty foolproof encryption, but it is like castles. Remember castles and invading armies. I'm sure that as a young person, as lots of young people did, you said, which would you rather be? You know, the person inside the castle defending it, or the army trying to get into it. And there's pluses and minuses to both. But if there's somebody inside the castle, think Trojan horse, who opens the door, that makes it a lot easier for the people to get in. Think Fall of Troy. Well, so it all just boils down to that. And if you go back and read things like John Keegan's History of Warfare, it's always boiled down to that.
Well, but all of that, even knowing all of that, it's one thing to know it, and it's another thing to be able to put it in the mouth of a character, to make it as seamlessly as you describe it. It's like literally it would be like this, the ease with which you would describe a stagecoach ride, 150 years ago. I mean, the way you write it is so...
Have you seen some of these guys at work?
No.
They just sit down and they go like that.
Yeah, I know. It's just, but it's interesting. You're bringing this into. It's a novel, obviously set in the future, but at the same time, it's a future where most of humanity has been wiped out. So this is being told as sort of backstory.
I thought you might like that part.
I did. And I'm very fond of the animals that chase the few remaining humans around. They're really great. And then you have all that high-tech stuff that went on at one point.
But it's going on now.
Well, I know, but I'm talking about in terms of writing it into the novel. And then you've got the Quakers, who are the incredibly simple, innocent souls who are left, among those left. And how do you get from that point in your mind when you're writing is fascinating to me, to bring it back to this world where at one point there's so much funny stuff. I know there are dark things in the book, but there's a lot of amazing satire in it. One of the great lines, we're all grown-ups here, so I think we can say it because it's in the book, damn it, I'm going to say it. One of the characters in the book is she's talking, all the Quakers who are these simple, they've been evolved or genetic.
They've been bioengineered. To get rid of the flaws in us.
So they're completely innocent souls, and they're sitting there, and somebody, one of the survivors, says, "Oh, fuck." And one of the Quakers says, who is this? Fuck. And so they invent a story because they don't understand the concept of profanity or, you know, any kind of pejorative. And so they have to make up a story that there really is a guy named Fuck, and he's
an invisible entity.
An entity,
sort of like an angel or a.
And you summon him, and you summon him in times of agitation by saying, "Oh fuck." It's fantastic. It's just fantastic.
And he comes to help out.
Yeah, he comes to help out. And so periodically through this great story, you'll have one of the Quakers sort of materialize, and there'll be a something bad going on, and they'll say, "Well, have you called Fuck yet?" You know, I love that stuff. But I want to talk about satire, because when you get, I mean, this...
Okay, here's an instance of it, maybe. As I'm reading along through Bad Monkey, what should I come across but a part where the admittedly semi-crazed girlfriend of the main character has presented him with a book by Margaret Atwood.
Well, yes.
Worse than that. Annotated in lavender ink. And she's saying things like, "I wish I could be like this."
Yes, yeah.
Now, is that satire?
That's homage. In my world, that's as close as it gets to homage. There was the character whose girlfriend, she is a little crazy, presents him with...
A little.
Yeah, well...
But she's very good looking.
Well, she's good looking, and she has an interesting story. She's on the run because she had an affair with a student, and she was teaching in high school many years ago, and she was about to be convicted, and she fled and got a new identity, and she's a fugitive from Kansas. Oklahoma, I think. She's a fugitive from Oklahoma, living in Key West, which is, I mean, this is
full of fugitives from Oklahoma.
Yeah, fugitives from Key West is
everywhere.
The fugitive capital of the United States. Everybody who's wanted for anything says, "Hey, this is a great idea. I'll drive on US 1 till the pavement ends." But anyway, it was presented in a loving way. I mean, and this is a guy that would not normally be reading literature, and so to him, he's reading into this. Wow, and he's enjoying your book, but he's now seeing himself reflected in a completely different way. You know,
because she's writing in the margins, "This is exactly what."
Right.
He would do.
Yeah, this is what you would do, and he's going, "What? What am I doing?" No, I mean, it's fun more than anything, but there is a point to all of it, and I think I wanted to ask you about the dystopian, the craze for dystopian fiction right now. I'm not even sure about whether you like the word or not, but if you look at the New York Times list sometimes, and we occasionally do when we have books out, and you'll see every other book is they're fighting a battle in a dystopian world. There's summaries that they do in the Times Book Review. There's two teenagers battling back from evil forces in a dystopian world, and you know, the world we're in right now is pretty goddamn dystopian to me, but
why do young people like this?
Yeah, I mean,
because they're in high school. Didn't you read those books when you were in high school?
No.
No?
No.
You didn't read Ray Bradbury when you were in high school?
I read some Ray Bradbury. I did not read, I was into mysteries. I would read the Hardy Boys, but Tom Swift, I thought, Jules Verne. I couldn't get into Jules Verne. I thought, first of all, I'm claustrophobic. I don't want to go thousands of leagues under the sea. But secondly, I mean, I think part of it was because even then I have an appetite for sort of the daily journalism. And the world that I was dealing with, and I've always dealt with, is what's going. I mean, I'm overwhelmed by what's happening right now. The thought of the future terrifies me, but everyone seems to be writing looking at this dark future, and we're the only survivor. The Hunger Games, for God's sake.
It's not new.
Yeah.
Turn of the century, 19th into 20th. There were some at that point. The 19th century had been full of utopias, people writing about improvements to the world, and that had gone on for quite a while because people really believed it could happen. You probably have not read The Coming Age by Bulwer Lytton. No, mid-19th century. Okay, so the guys are, at that point you didn't have to go on a spaceship. In fact, there weren't any. So he's walking along, he's doing some cave exploring, and he falls down a hole. And in the hole, or underneath, down underground, there's this other world, and it's all lit by, indirect lighting. And in this world, stop giggling. In this world, the women are larger than the men, but everybody is quite serene and intelligent, and they all have inflatable wings that they can fly around on. And this is fueled by a substance within them called vril, V-R-I-L. So one of the things is that the women have to be very, very nice to the men, because if they aren't, the men will fly away on their wings. I think this was about men's clubs in the 19th century.
Yeah.
Not Mrs. Beaton says much the same, make a nice home life or he's going to go to the club. Anyway, this so impressed people that things called Vrillian societies sprang up. And this vril gave its name to bovril, the condensed cubes of beef bouillon that appeared during the First World War, and a believer that there really was an underground world with indirect lighting where people flew around powered by vril. One of the people who believed that was none other than Adolf Hitler. Now, the entrance to this world was supposed to be in Norway. And he actually sent some explorers looking for the hole in the ground that would take you to the world of the vril. What do you have to say about that? How do we So you don't like the dystopias. Maybe you would prefer the Vrillian world. But people did then turn away from utopias. I think at the time of the turn of the century, the first ones appeared. Jack London wrote one of them. There's one called The Purple Cloud, in which a mysterious purple cloud annihilated everybody. And then along came World War I and World War II, and some real utopian attempts had been made, such as the USSR, Nazi Germany, Mao's China, and Pol Pot's Cambodia, all of which were presented as things are going to be really, really a lot better, but first we have to get rid of those people. And it became very hard to write utopias with a straight face unless they were in a galaxy far, far away and in another time. So part of it is that I think the imagined world didn't have a lot of places to go except to dystopia. But also I think people are genuinely worried about the effects of climate change, the shaky financial state of the unified global world of today, and they're worried. We used to be worried about being blown up by atom bombs.
Right. No, I think there's good reason to be worried, but I guess my point was that not a lot of this stuff, I think, comes with, and a sense of humor and a sort of a satirical look. I mean, what you've done with your novels and projecting them into the future is you make them into a great opportunity for a commentary on the way we live now, because they're finding relics and they're references to the old days. And there's a great scene in this book where they go to this spa. They're running and they're chasing somebody, and they end up in an old spa. And the relics of the spa.
It's a good place to hide out a worldwide plague, I think.
Yes, a spa.
It's lots of towels and soap. You want things like that.
But I think like the Hunger Games, they could use a little more of that stuff in it. I mean, a little fun, but there's like no fun. And I think it's legitimate to be terrified of the future. I'm terrified of the present. I mean, I live in a state of terror, but I also think that if you've been doing this a while, and I see these novels that sort of flock into it, and it just seems that one tries to outdo the next in terms of how dark and horrible and bleak we. And maybe they're aiming for a different demographic, obviously, but
Harry Potter's funny.
Yeah, there are great. Yeah, there's some.
But
great.
Of course, Harry Potter is not a dystopia.
No, he's.
It's a pure invention.
Right, that's good too.
I hate to break it to you.
I actually read the Harry Potter. I have kids, and we read the Harry Potter thing, and it was, But I'm just talking about the craze. I'm tired of dystopic teenage.
Well, how can you be tired of them if you haven't read them?
I'm tired of reading about them. Well, the other thing is,
You're tired of being on the New York Times bestseller list.
We have a 13-year-old in the house,
oh.
And so and he's the girls that he are in his class are all into this stuff in a huge way, and it seems more than his male friends are.
You know why he's into it.
Well, it's possible. It's possible. Do you think about these scenes? Do you think about when you're writing this that this is okay? This is going to be a funny part. This is going to be funny.
No.
No, I don't either when I'm writing it. But yet when I read when Toby, the character who's narrating this, Matt Adam, is reading to the Quakers, who have to be read to in a very special way, obviously, because they don't know anything. It's some of the funniest stuff I've ever read. Now, when you get into that voice and you tell that, you sit down yourself and you say, "That's pretty good."
No, I just think this is how it would have to be.
Right.
It would be like that.
Yeah, no, but the lines. But it's true. I get asked. And I know Dave Barry gets asked a lot because, he's one of these guys that's just as funny in person as he is on the printed page. And he often, if he and I ever did events together, we'd say, "Do you guys laugh when you're writing your stuff? Do you just laugh out loud at your own stuff?" And it's like, no, it's just the opposite. The harder you try, the grimmer it gets. But at some point, a voice in my head goes off and says, that line is going to work, or that scene is working, that dialogue is okay. I think that's going to cover it. But there's no smiling, there's no yucking, there's no aha, that's great. How do you feel when you write something like? At some level.
About the same.
Yeah.
I think it's about the same.
Yeah.
So I don't think you're setting out intentionally to write a joke book.
Right.
You're setting out to write a book involving crimes frequently performed by people who aren't very bright. And it is indeed quite instructive. You can get these books in English railway stations, or you used to be able to, called True Crimes. But those are the people who got caught. They got caught because they weren't very bright, and they did these very, very stupid things. It's almost like, do you read the Darwin Awards at all?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so it's almost like that. It's not really funny because the people have died, but you think, why did you do that?
Right, yeah.
Well, they were drunk, or they weren't thinking, or they thought the window was open. In the case of lighting a firecracker inside, lighting a stick of dynamite inside the car to see what it would be like if you threw it out the window, except the window was closed.
But the truth, I don't know if you get much mail from prisoners, but
I think you probably do.
I get some letters.
I used to when I was younger, but they wouldn't be like yours.
Well,
Mine would say things like, "I'm getting out soon."
I get literary.
I saw your picture on the book.
Yeah, okay.
I don't think yours are like that.
No, mine is they're actually they have a lot of time to read in prison, and they have ideas for new novels that they like to share. But mostly what they want me to do is when they get out of prison, they would like to collaborate with me on their own novel. I could help them write their own.
I thought you meant on a new and improved crime that this time they're going to pull off.
But the recurring theme in the mail is, and I hate to generalize, but these are not terribly bright guys for the most part.
Or possibly they might be bright, but maybe they haven't had the education.
No, these are not.
No.
No, these are just not bright guys. They've done things, and they haven't done it just once. They've done it repeatedly, because in Florida you have to do something many, many times before the authorities take notice. And you're just struck by, and you mentioned Darwin, and I've made the argument that we are de-evolving as a species, at least in Florida. From my observations, we're definitely going the wrong direction. But in the old days, and you have some of these kinds of critters in your book, but in the old days we would have some of these people, and I hate to say this, but saber-toothed tigers would have culled them from the herd. These are the ones that, as the human race was migrating, as it did in the early years, that these were the ones that would have hung back or gotten distracted or decided that, oh, let's go steal somebody's fruit. And they would have peeled, they just would have been eaten, and that would have been sort of the genetic backstop. And we don't have that anymore. Now they're out there. They're on mortifications. There's no end to where they go. And I'm not saying we need to reintroduce saber-toothed tigers as a species. I'm just saying that I think the process of evolving has been hurt in some way. And there's nothing I can do about it except write about them. What do you do? I mean, we had, in the month of August, we had 3 mayors of different cities arrested in Miami-Dade County. Three mayors for corruption, 3 different bribery cases, 3 different mayors. Most people live in a town where their mayor never gets arrested for bribery. We had 3 in 1 month. I said it was like the trifecta of sleaze. And they were complete drooling morons. When you read the police reports and you read the FBI, they just were dumb as a box of rocks. And you think, okay, saber-toothed tiger. That's all that's it. Not a positive,
okay,
rosy.
so tell me about Key West. Now, I've been to Key West on several different occasions because they have a very good thing there in January called the Key West Literary Seminar. And it's always a theme. It's a theme, and they have people who come and talk about the theme. And stop making that face.
No, I've been there.
You've been there. Okay. And nobody, I haven't seen any of these criminal activities that you have described. Is that because I didn't go on the right street at the right time, or I was just lucky?
You were just lucky.
I was just lucky.
The Keys, I lived down there for a while, about 8 or 9 years, not in Key West, but up the road a little ways. And it's just a place full of characters. But I don't know. I mean, as a journalist, and if you evolve into a novelist from journalism, you always sort of have your eye out for characters, and you can't. You're not. I mean, you poach shamelessly from the real people that you meet in real events. Key West has always been a magnet for incredible scoundrels and great. They're just great stories. They had a fire chief who was dealing cocaine for years, and his name was Bum Fardo. Bum Fardo was the guy's name. I could 5 years I couldn't make up a name as good as Bum Fardo. The guy disappeared from the face of Key West, from the planet, mysteriously or however, at least 20 years ago, and you still go down Duval Street and people, where is Bum Fardo? You can still buy the T-shirt. But you have to love it in a way. I mean, back from the rum running days, running of illegal aliens from Cuba, I mean, it's just a pirate town, And I think that's why writers gravitate there. That's why the Key West Literary Festival is so popular. But I mean, I'm blessed because Florida is just full of material and full of characters. And if the tank is running low, I just read the Miami Herald, and there's about 5 ideas that just every single day that pop out. That could be a whole book.
Now let me ask you this: in Bad Monkey, there is a policeman who has been, he's in sequestration from the force because of a naughty thing that he did.
Yes.
Which I'm sure you have never done such a naughty thing yourself. But he is put on to restaurant inspection.
Yes.
Now, how did you do the research for that?
The restaurant inspector, yeah, this cop who gets in trouble and he's sort of busted down to restaurant inspector, the Roach Patrol we call it in Florida, and I did not go along. The state doesn't really invite people to go along on when they inspect the kitchens of restaurants, which is a good thing. Especially they don't invite reporters to go or novelists. But what they do have in Florida, we have something called the Sunshine Law, which almost every public record has to be provided, and so every restaurant inspection is available online. I don't recommend this if you're going out tonight, by the way. But
is it available immediately?
A week or so after, whenever it's filed and put in digitally. But the places that are shut down or they're warning, whatever, and the detail is down to the number of rat droppings they found in the pancake mix. I mean, it's right there. So I spent some time going through that and got my inspiration for what Yancey, my character, would have to go through. I mean, he was chasing bad guys, he was busting criminals, and now all of a sudden he's literally, for instance, one of the details which I had in the novel, which is true, that in the state of Florida, when you go in and you're inspecting a kitchen, you have to, if you're the inspector, keep a separate tally and fill out a separate form for dead roaches versus live roaches. Why this would matter to a diner, a customer, I can't imagine. A roach is a roach, and if it's in the rice pudding, it's in the rice pudding. Whether it's moving or not wouldn't seem to have any effect, but they're very specific. The counts they do.
I think it's more distressing if they're moving.
Well, I guess, but on the one hand, they could get out and leave. It's the pot. You're not wondering, okay, how long has it been there? It's fresh, you know. But that's a real thing. But all of that stuff is available now online. I really spoiled everybody's dinner tonight. God damn, sorry.
So your character loses a lot of weight while he's doing this.
Yes, he drops about 40 pounds in 3 weeks.
Now, did you lose any weight while you were writing it?
I probably always lose some weight writing it. It didn't, but you know, it didn't. It was kind of gross to write about it, because what I did do was steer away when I was researching this from restaurants that I like to go to, that my wife and I like to go to. I purposely didn't look up any of them because it would have broken my heart, you know, to get some sort of vermin report. So I picked restaurants I don't go to. And I didn't use their real names, obviously. Oh, you know what I want to ask you about, because you do something very nice, and you have done this where, this isn't an auction, but where you've allowed folks who have...
Yeah, they are auctions, usually.
Well, I didn't want to start one right now, is what I meant.
No, well, there isn't an opening right now.
Yeah, but where the names of characters, and some of the names in Matt Adam, you can actually, if you're a kind, generous person, end up as a character in your book. How do you get away with that and not...
Well, the person has bid for that position, and you have to say, you know, you don't get a choice as to what sort of character you're going to be. So they just have to take whatever they get. They don't give the money to me.
And you've never been sued or threatened or...
No, because they've agreed to do it.
Yeah, but I see my fan base is different.
And I haven't. Yeah, right. Well, then you probably shouldn't do this.
I've done it. Yeah. What I was going to tell you is I tried to do it a couple of times.
Yes.
And had bad results.
What were the bad results?
Well, there was a woman who gave a lot of money, and it was an auction for a good cause, a conservation thing. And then when she appeared, instead of just saying, "Oh, well, I'll be happy to read she misunderstood and thought that I was going to write a novel about her.
Oh.
And she became somewhat agitated and irate that I wasn't going to be collaborating with her, a fictional version of her, a glorified fictional version of her, and that we weren't going to be spending lots of time together working on the novel. And it turned into a cluster. And I said, you know, I can't do this anymore. My fans are totally unreliable, and I'm not going to. But I read this, and you do this, and you raise all this great money for these great causes, and I'm envious of that. I can't trust my readers with that.
Maybe just some of them.
Maybe some of them.
Maybe just that one.
I don't know, but I know the writers who do it, and you've never had a problem.
Not so far.
Yeah, well, don't get any ideas.
Yeah.
When you set out, trilogy is an ambitious thing. When you set out, when you wrote Oryx and Crake, did you see this as 3 books?
No.
I love to hear that. I'm glad you said that. I would have been horrified if you'd said you did.
No, I didn't.
No, because they surprised you.
Well, then I realized that the ending is so indeterminate, and not only that, there are these groups of people glimpsed out a train window or appearing on television that we actually don't mingle with in the book. We just see them in this removed way. So I wanted to know what they were doing in the world. In the first book, the character Jimmy grows up in a gated community of a biotech corporation, because in the future it's all going to be gated communities, because intellectual property is going to reside within the brains of the people working there, because the internet leaks like a sieve, as we know. And we also know that you can just download a whole bunch of stuff onto a thumb drive and walk out the door. We've just seen that in 2 instances. So in the future, it will be individuals being forcibly removed for the information that they contain. So of course they have to all live in the gated community, and therefore he can only see the rest of the world through train windows or on television. But there is a rest of the world. So in the second one, we go into the slums where the green religious cult is raising vegetables, bees on a rooftop, and experimenting with Vision Quest mushrooms, as they would. And
bliss pills.
And then that's the chemical corporations who have already been experimenting with us without telling us the results on a pretty grand scale. And in the third one, we followed the group of people who were actively resisting.
But when you started, I mean, obviously the story and the stories of these characters started growing like vines in a way that you wanted to keep following them. Because
I wanted to keep following them. Yes, I would have made it much easier for myself if I had known from the beginning that there were going to be 3. As it was a welter of Post-it notes in my life.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I mean, I've known other writers who have written trilogies, but they set out.
They set out to write them.
And they were just they were infuriatingly organized about it. I mean,
it is infuriating when other people are organized.
It drives me nuts.
I tried to be organized once. It was a disaster.
What's that all about? How possibly? We were talking before we came on about our friend Dutch Leonard, who passed away recently, and he always had this great line. And I was at an event with him one time where he was asked, you know, by a very earnest reader, Mr. Leonard, do you know how your books are going to end when you start them? And his response was, why would I write them if I knew how they were going to end? And that's the way I feel about it too. I mean, you love the surprise of not knowing Some of the best characters, or at least the ones I liked the best, were just supposed to be walk-ons. And all of a sudden they turn into something different, and they come alive on the page, and they bump other characters off the stage. And that's half the fun of it. For me, it's tight wire act, because you don't have that outline, at least in my case, an outline or a sense, but I like the adventure of sort of being swept along with them.
If you wrote classic standard solution mysteries, you wouldn't be able to do that.
No.
But in fact, you don't. You write more things that are quite a lot more like surfing.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It is, yeah. You just ride the wave. But it's a selfish indulgence in a way, because I envy. I know many of my friends who write procedurals, police, and they have sort of the recurring character, and I mean, I don't want to use the word formula, but they know exactly going in, here's where it is and here's where it's going. And I sort of envy having that blueprint, because it would make your day-to-day life of writing a little less stressful, but it would not be as much fun, at least for me.
I don't think it would be. Let me ask you this question. As a child, did you like coloring books?
I like crayons.
That's different.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't like staying in the lines.
No.
Not at all.
No. Nor
I
did
thought the lines were
boring.
Yeah, boring.
There you are.
And I didn't want my elephant to be shaped like their elephant and that kind of thing.
You also didn't want your elephant to be the color.
Oh, no.
No. That elephants were supposed to be.
No. But that's good to encourage your kids that way. But I just, when you go to writers' conferences, and I don't go to many, but I do go, and you listen, because you get a lot of questions usually from an audience about how you write and what's your day like, how do you organize, Post-it notes, index cards, whatever it is, and then you listen to other very successful writers or writers who you admire telling how they do it, and some of them are so precise and organized. I mean, I had a guy one time say, I write the last sentence of the novel first, and I'm thinking, well, done, case closed. I wish I could do that. It's a short book, but there you go. You got right to the bottom of it. But it was almost like a creative writing exercise. Then how do you get from that to, then it was like this, see how I was able to take this one sentence and build a novel to it. I couldn't see it. Yes.
Woo, I've never heard that one before.
Yeah, no.
The last sentence, wow.
Yeah, it was all building. I knew the last sentence is what appeared to me first. And I would settle for the first sentence, honest to God. I would just take a good first sentence over that and be happy with it. But everybody's different.
At the Key West Literary Seminar.
Yes, I'm going in January, as a matter of fact.
Oh, what is the theme?
I think something about crime.
That would be it, yes.
But I'm not. He's going to kill me. I don't remember exactly, but it's
crime. Yes.
Something to do with crime and writing about crime.
Yes.
And
okay.
and it's January, and Key West is a very nice place to be in January. So
I helped out with the science fiction one that they had.
Oh, right.
Yes, and I also gave a workshop. It's very nice to give a workshop outside in January for a Canadian.
Yeah.
You would not give a workshop in Canada outside in January. You're a little bit crazy. But what I wanted was, I wanted to talk only about first chapters. And I most particularly wanted to talk about first paragraphs and, if possible, first lines. But first chapters. So that's all we did. We just looked at first chapters.
And that's brilliant, because you don't have to
read the whole
book.
Yeah,
that's
there's
fantastic.
That, but also,
I'm going to steal that idea.
If you can't get the reader past the first chapter,
right,
your brilliant thing in the second third of the book, they'll never get there.
No, that's. I have to say, one of the smarter moves I made was deciding that I was going to go into newspapers when I was young, because the first thing you learn in a newsroom, and it's daily newsroom writing, is that in the old days you would have what they called the jump, meaning you get 4 or 5 4 or 5 paragraphs on the front page, and then you would jump to the inside, like did you do at the Times, to read the rest of the story. And the trick was, if you didn't hook them by the jump, they were never going to finish the story. So the point of the whole lesson of the editors was, as Breslin, a friend of mine, always said, the worst sin you can commit is to be boring. You got to grab them. Even if you're writing about the sewer board meeting, you have to somehow make them want to keep reading. And it's good training, because when you move into the world of fiction or even writing nonfiction books, all the great talent, all the great ideas are wasted if you can't keep them turning the page. It's just wasted. And so, I mean, that was just always, it sort of beat into me at a young age, but I think, I'm glad I did it.
I tried to be a journalist. I announced to my family that I was going to be a journalist when I was 16, but they had a real journalist to dinner. We have a lot of second cousins. So they'd had a second cousin who was a real journalist, and this would be in 1956, before you were born.
No. No. I was around.
You were around. You're just a little bit shorter than me at that time. And so this real journalist turned up, and he said that if I, a female person, went to work for a newspaper, I would end up writing the obituaries and the ladies' page, and that would be it.
Oh, my God.
So I didn't.
No, I don't blame you.
My career was cut off. My career in journalism was cut off then and there.
But probably in that time, he was right, because that's the way. Because even when I started working in, 1974 was my first newspaper job, when you were, the features section was considered where the female reporters, many of them were steered to feature writing and things. And we had some great journalists and who were in the newsroom who were women who were really just knocking them dead. But by and large, we had an editor, an old crusty guy, who just thought that they should be writing.
What do we mean by features?
Well, features would be craft shows. I actually had to cover a couple of those myself. But stuff about parenting, anything that had to do stuff around the house. Oh, that would be her job to write that. It was just the way they thought of it. Now,
did those people like writing those features?
No, they did not.
No, they didn't.
They didn't, and that was the beginning. That was right after Watergate. You have to remember. I entered journalism. We still had we had a felon in the White House. It was the greatest. Nixon was still in the White House. It was the most energizing time you could be a journalist. Watergate was breaking all around. And there were a lot of college kids, men and women, who all of a sudden wanted to get into journalism and all wanted to work for the Washington Post, And so that it all began to change. Then is what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. That's when it changed. And then when it's
so
much
they moved
different.
away from features at that time.
Well, at that time, yeah.
Girls did, or boys had to do features.
They
mixed it up.
It was a different mindset from that generation of editors who were really like out of Ben Hecht. And they're gone, and they faded away. But it took some time.
Now there's one more question that we can discuss, and then we're going to open it up to the audience.
Uh-oh.
What should that question be?
I'll let you decide.
That's a dangerous thing to do.
I know.
Oh, let me think. Okay, so it seems to me that there are two kinds of writers. There are those who allow their characters to eat, and those who don't. You do allow your characters to eat.
I
but
do.
Dashiell Hammett didn't. Nobody ever eats in his books. No.
That's true.
They smoke, they drink, they never eat anything.
What about Chandler? Did Chandler?
They don't eat much.
They didn't eat much in Chandler's. They do a lot of drinking.
No.
Yeah, that's true. I hadn't thought about that. But on the other hand, there are writers who will spend an entire chapter on a meal.
That can go on a bit long.
It does go on a bit long.
You've
You've read these novels where someone, let me tell you what's happening here. Someone the writer has gone to a very, very good restaurant, and he's bought a very, very expensive meal that he's going to write off as research.
Is that what it is?
Absolutely. And every salad, every olive he ate, everything that went down that night is going to be in that chapter. I'm telling you, that was the... I remember when I was a kid...
How do you know this?
I remember when I was a kid, I used to read John D. MacDonald because all these great stories were set in, many of them in Fort Lauderdale, where I was born and grew up.
It's a lot of fishing.
Yeah, a lot of fishing.
We could have talked about fishing.
Yes,
We've got some common ground with the fishing.
Yeah, you like the fish.
But let's go on with the
Oh,
meals.
well, the John D. MacDonald. Anyway, I'm reading one of his novels, and I may have the country wrong, but all of a sudden, Travis McGee, his great, hard-bitten guy who lives on the houseboat in Bahia Mar, all of a sudden he's in Greece. Travis McGee. I mean,
you shock me.
No, he's gone to Greece or Italy or somewhere exotic, and he's way out of his element, and he's only there for a chapter or two. And I later talked to a friend at McDonald's, and about this. I didn't know John very well before he passed away, but I asked him. I said, "Oh yeah, that was a trip he took with his family. He just wanted to write it off, so he threw in a couple scenes."
Okay. Well,
and I learned from that.
Yes, I can see that you did.
Have you ever done that?
I've never thought of it. I don't have a devious criminal mind the way you do.
Well, I don't know, because I don't know what the Canadian tax laws are, but I know. Here's the way you have to look at it. If IBM guy, when they hold these the major corporations do this all the time. They have these giant conventions in Vegas where everybody goes just for business. And huge. They spend $1 million on a national convention, and all of that. Then let John D. MacDonald go to Greece, for God's sakes. I mean, it's the same principle. It's the same law. All right, now how do we do the questions? Can you see out there?
I'll just tell you, there's one great eating detective in literature.
Who's that?
It's Inspector Maigret.
Oh yes.
Georges Simenon novels. Has quite wonderful meals. But he does it as a matter of course. It just happens to be what he eats that day.
That guy wrote how many novels?
An incredible number. And how he would do it, which I don't think any human being on the planet would ever have been able to do it. First of all, he sharpened a lot of pencils. And then he went into a room for 2 weeks and started. And if he got interrupted at any point, he had to stop. And it took him 2 weeks to write one of those things. Little meals delivered to the door.
My goodness. Did he have a happy life?
No, it's all right, he didn't.
That's all I was going to say.
He was too driven.
Yeah, he was
very, very driven.
Gosh, so he didn't go to Greece or any place
I think he did lots of going to Greece. Yeah, but Inspector Maigret would go with him. And then,
that's right. You could see the possibilities.
Yeah, but Greece was a lot closer for him.
That's true. That's true. Well, not that I would ever do anything like that. I'm just saying, when I read that, it seemed like a good idea at the time.
Yeah. You could go to Canada.
I was in Toronto back in June, but I had you were talking about this book about what was it called? Mortification?
Mortification, writers and their public shame. It's a bunch of writers who were asked to tell about a bad thing that had happened to them in public during the course of their writing career. And I have a piece in there. I've got 3 mortifications. The first one being my very first public signing of all time, which took place in the men's sock and underwear department of the Hudson's Bay Company in Edmonton, Alberta. I don't know why. It was the publicist's first week on the job. I frightened a lot of men because the book was called The Edible Woman. So there I was sitting with my little book called The Edible Woman. I was 29 years old. And these men came in. It was winter, as it always is in Edmonton. And And they came in their galoshes, and they took one look at this, and you could hear the galoshes going up, running in the opposite direction. I sold 2 books. I felt quite crushed. Question time?
So we will take questions here. If you could come up to the mic. I've noticed that a good question can be asked in about 52 seconds. So if you can come up here.
Were you going to tell about your mortification?
Oh, yes. Tell us one mortification.
Oh, no, because I don't want to...
While we wait for somebody to come up, at least one.
It wasn't a public mortification. It was a private mortification. I was in Toronto a few years ago, and the power went out on the book tour, and the power went out in the hotel. And I was up very high in the hotel, and I'm a person that doesn't like to be in a dark room, in a sealed room with no windows to open, very high with the power out and sirens in the streets.
Oh, why don't you like that?
I don't know. It's just an idiosyncrasy I have. So I decided I was going to walk down to the lobby. And I walked, and it was 20-odd floors in darkness. I didn't have a flashlight. And I get to the lobby, and there's a crowd in the lobby, and there's a fist fight going on in the lobby. And I lay on I just lay down on a couch. It was like 3 in the morning. And finally there was a guy who said, okay, I think we've got, these are words, by the way, when you hear them, don't take them up on it. He said, I think we've got an elevator working. I should have waited for something a little more definitive, but anyway, the long story. I get in the elevator with a security guard and a flashlight, and we start up, and the elevator stops. This is for a claustrophobic person. That's not a good moment. I have like a book signing early in the morning. I'm thinking, and the security guard, he looks at me. He doesn't want to spend the night in the elevator with me either. So we make an executive decision to open the elevator doors and get off wherever the hell we are. And we know it's not going to be on a floor exactly because it's stuck. So we open up, and we're like halfway between 2 floors, and we literally crawl out. He and I, celebrated author. And we pick our way, and the floor we stopped on was under construction. It was a complete construction site. It was debris and rubble and rebar, and I made my way through, and I sallied on in the book tour. But anyway, it was one of my nightmares. Whenever I have Toronto on, I get the schedule, I say, please, whatever you do, please put me in that same hotel because I had such a great experience last time. Anyway, I want to see some.
Thank you both very much. Mr. Hyson had mentioned, Ms. Atwood, that you had a voice, Toby's voice, in your book. And after reading many of your books as I was younger, the voice was always a woman's voice. Was there a conscious decision when you wrote Oryx and Crake to give your main character a male voice? And was that very difficult for you switching from a female voice for many of your books to the male voice?
All right, it was a conscious decision for a couple of reasons. One of them being that for years, everybody had been saying to me, why do you always write from the point of view of a woman? Now, it wasn't true. I hadn't always, but the answer, because I'm lazy, never satisfied them. So I thought, okay, this time I'm going to write it all from the point of view of a young male person. And no, it wasn't that hard because I've known a lot of young male people, and also you can always get it checked out by one of them to see if you've made any really glaring mistakes. So that's why I did it. And as soon as that book was published, everybody started saying, why did you all of a sudden? Why? How come you couldn't you have told this story from the point of view of a woman? What's wrong with the woman? Why didn't you use a woman? And then I would say, how many women have you ever known who play video games online with each other with their backs turned to each other? It just doesn't happen a lot.
No.
Not with women. They might play video games, but they're usually looking at the other person in the room, in my experience.
Can I tell you, I'll interrupt just for, can I tell you how I got turned on to your books? Because as I said, being a Norwegian, I avoid anything that even smacks of looking into the future. But the guy who turned me on to your books and you were talking about your narrator's voice, and it is he's a fishing guide in Helena, Montana, who is a friend of mine, and I don't mean to say he would seem to be an unlikely reader, but he's a total, I mean, he's just one of these big burly outdoor guys, and he gave me one of your books. He said, "You got to read this. This is the greatest thing," and it was I believe was The Handmaid's Tale. And but just to show you the reach of these things is that he's not a gamer, he's not in it, but he's a reader, and I mean, it was just out of the blue. And he doesn't recommend a lot of books to me. He reads, but I mean, so it sort of took me back. I said, God, if he read it, I'm going to read it. But it was just, it wasn't, it was just an unlikely sort of source. And I thought I mean, you probably get letters from it, but it is not. You reach a lot of people in lots of different places. I mean, on the Missouri River in Montana. So,
I'm pleased.
Yes.
Hi, I have to briefly introduce myself as that Twitter follower who first introduced both you and Rob Delaney, which I might say has been the love story of the century.
That's you.
It is. But considering that digital media has changed the world of publishing in many ways, I was wondering if you thought that using Twitter and other forms of social media is just a new iteration of the author and fan interaction, or if it has actually opened up the world to new forms of outreach and connections.
So we have here somebody who is new to Twitter. You just started it.
No, I've never. Is there someone tweeting on my behalf? I do not.
There's somebody pretending to be you.
Are you
I'm here
kidding
to
me?
tell you.
Wow. Well, are they any good?
And they haven't been there very long.
So I have never. I'm going to confess
in
that it's not me.
self-defense, you might have to go on and be yourself in order to get rid of this other person who's pretending to be you.
Can I ask a question about Twitter?
When I went on, there were 2 Margaret Atwoods pretending to be me, and one of them was using a picture of me.
Really?
But you can get verified on Twitter by Twitter itself, who will say that this is actually the real one.
So you actually interact with your fans?
Okay, so what Twitter is like is...
I mean, you say something and they can respond directly to you?
And they do, or
Wow.
the other way around. So what Twitter is most like is like having your own little radio station to which you can invite guests, or you can broadcast news, or you can share items that interest you, or you can recommend other people's books. So it's partly like that, and it's partly also like a party with a lot of guests. And
I mean, how many times a day or a week would you do
and
this?
if the guests are unruly, you can eject them.
That's what I was going to ask you. Can you like 86 them? They can't get back on. You're done.
That's right. You can block them.
Hit the bricks, gone.
Yes.
Boom. Oh, that would be useful.
From
my
what you've
case.
told me about
No, well, you understand what I've got. The other question, obviously, in my case, do prisoners have access to Twitter?
Well, the other thing about Twitter is that you never actually know who these people are. They might be who they purport to be, or they might be somebody else, or they might have a picture of their feet, or somebody else's feet, or they might have a picture of their cat, or they might have a picture of somebody completely different. There is a guy on Twitter who has one called, I think it's a guy. We all think it's a guy, who has a thing called Very Short Story. And he does very short stories on Twitter, and he's very good, I have to tell you. He does stories in 140 characters, and you can challenge him with any word or topic, and he will do a 140-character story. Talk about discipline.
That is scary. Yeah, I mean, I probably should do it, and at least find out
No,
who...
there is no should. Nobody should do any of this stuff if they don't enjoy it. I started doing it by accident, in that I was building a website for a novel at that moment of publishing meltdown, when everybody was remember that? Chasing their tail around and not knowing what was happening after 2008. So I thought, I'm going to build my own website. So I did that. I know more about it now. I would have done it somewhat differently, but they said, what you need is, you need to have a Twitter feed. And I said, what is this Twitter of which you speak? And they said, it is really simple, they said. Here is how you do it. I said, why do you do that? And we went on from there. So I started doing it, and it happens to suit me. In fact, a lot of this stuff happens to suit me because I'm very curious. And I like to explore these different things. Some of them are of more interest to me than others. For instance, how many people have done Pinterest? Yeah, so Pinterest is good for certain things, but it seems to appeal largely to those who are fascinated with interior decoration and sharing objects, sharing pictures of objects. So there's something called Flipboard, which is a good tool for amalgamating background articles and things like that. And we are indeed about to launch a Flipboard for Mad Adam, which will have a lot of the background science pieces and stuff about Chicky Knob-like
And you put this together yourself, or do you have folks who help you?
I have folks who help show me how to do it. But then once I know how to do it, I can do it myself. It's sort of like driving a car.
But here's, I have
You
a
also
face
learn
that,
a lot of new words on Twitter, I can tell you. You learn a lot of strange phrases.
well, this is what worries me. The folks at Random House were very kind, and they set up a Facebook page for me. And
Well, but they run it themselves, I should think.
well, actually, my wife can go on the page and put things on there.
You can put things on, yeah. But
I don't know how to sign on to it, but I'm told that there's a lot of activity on it. But honest to God, I guess, what is it, Facebook.com? I just sign on?
no, I think you need a name that you are.
Here's what becomes terrifying. When some of the input that I get when readers interact with me, it really makes me never want to come out of my house. So I've shied all these years away because people will send me, for instance, I had a book, and there's a character that appears in some of my novels who eats roadkill. People were sending me things, very disturbing things, recipes. And
I was going to ask you about the recipes.
I became gun shy about dealing with the public because, and I had someone show up at a book signing with a bag of something, you know, and I just thought, you know what, I just better not go out of the house. And so now the idea that you could have an interaction continuing.
All right, so the beauty of this is you don't have to go out of the house.
But they'll find your house, is what I'm afraid of, you know.
No, they're less likely to find your house.
Yeah, maybe not.
Actually, especially if you.
All right. Well, I'll think about it. This poor
later,
guy sitting
yes.
on the floor. I'm sorry.
Hi. This question's for Ms. Atwood. When reading Oryx and Crake, I got to the ending not knowing that there was going to be a sequel and a trilogy.
That same with me, right? Yeah.
So, well, I guess that partially answers my question because I got to the end, I was breathtaking, and then I was delighted to find that there was going to be a sequel and, in fact, a trilogy. So I was curious whether at what point of the writing or after writing, like, was there a specific moment where you realized that you had to continue writing the story? And
Yes,
continuing on?
quite shortly after I finished it, indeed. because the same questions were occurring to me that in fact occurred to a lot of readers. And I too wanted to know the answers to them, but I wasn't going to be able to find out those answers without writing the books. So I'm like you. I write to find out what's going to happen.
Exactly.
If I already knew, I wouldn't bother.
Yeah.
Hi, thank you both so much. My question is for Ms. Atwood. I've wondered for a while, after reading Oryx and Crake, where is Oryx from?
Where is Oryx from? Oryx is from Cambodia. Does that help?
Thank you.
That was the best question ever, right?
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that I found most interesting about reading Mad Adam and Oryx and Crake were all of the different foods that you came up with and things like chicky noobs and all of these different engineered foods. I was wondering if the research you did with these foods has changed the foods that you eat now in like doing all of the research in the gross stuff that we're putting into things. Has that affected you and what you're deciding to eat?
Well, no, I had already made those decisions about what to eat. The question is essentially some of the about the engineered food products in the book, which we are indeed busily working on right now in the real world. And it's not always a bad thing. For instance, I've heard some reactions to lab meat of an ick, yuck kind, but think of the methane that would not be ejected into the atmosphere, and think of the animals that would not be killed if you were in fact growing real protein in a lab. Because we're not talking about plastic meat in this instance. I admit that chicky knobs were a bit of a stretch. There was an urban legend going around that Colonel Saunders had developed chickens that had 4 drumsticks. And chicky knobs evolved from that. So chicky knobs, in fact, are grown on an animal or an animal item that can produce multiple wings or drumsticks or chicken breasts, but it doesn't have a head. So no brain, no pain. It can truly be said that no animal suffered in the production of these items.
One last question, let it be great.
Thank you both. I would like to know, you finished your books, you finished your writings. Is there any character that either of you that have written in a book that you've missed, that come back to haunt you, that you really, really loved, but you're no longer using or are not part of your future writings?
How about the senator?
Oh, the governor, the old governor.
The governor, yeah.
He's coming back.
Is he coming back?
Yeah, he is.
How many books has he been in? 2, 3? 3.
I don't know, 3 or 4 at least. I don't know.
Now, was that based on a real person?
I have had 3 former governors of Florida who tell people that character of Skink is based on them. They're completely sad, deluded people. No, I don't know if you do this, but he was a character I invented because I wished there had been someone like him. And that's one of the selfish pleasures of writing novels, is they're my stories and my characters. And I wish in my lifetime there had been somebody like that, so I brought him to life in the book. It was no more complicated than that. How about you?
I think too early to say.
That's a good answer. Too early, you might miss them later.
Well, I hope you enjoyed meeting each other on stage. We certainly enjoyed having you, Carl Hayes and Margaret Atwood.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.